What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well. Thursday, teacher workshop tomorrow, so you probably get to sleep in. So, something to look forward to. I hope there wasn't too much grumbling as I passed out the study guide. They're usually, another one of these. Yes, another one of those today, which means there will be a vocabulary quiz coming up next week. And this will be due next week. But if you play your cards right, you might be able to fill out a lot of this while I'm talking here. And you might have that passed in before the end of the class. I know a lot of people like to do that, get it off their plate, not have to worry about anything. Before we get into the words, and I will try to keep this short, try to keep it about 10 to 15 minutes, definitely under 15 minutes. But what I want to do is take a look at Google Classroom really quickly. So right at the top, we have all of the Rwanda stuff. So that's what we're doing now. But follow the rabbit-proof fence. That will be going into PowerSchool very soon, and only about 30 people have done it so far. There's the Cambodian genocide quiz, technically due tomorrow, so I might put those grades in during the workshop. Make sure you take that quiz. And then the Cambodian final assessment, we just got that on Monday. So due tomorrow. I got a lot of grades to put in. You know how it works. I will probably give everyone a couple days, and those will be in by like the middle of next week. So something to look at. All right, let's take a look at these words that we will be seeing on Monday. It's at the bottom right there. These words are from the article we will be reading on Monday to learn as much as we can about the Rwandan genocide. I know it can be overwhelming. Yesterday, you got a little introduction. Hopefully, you remember the terms Hutu and Tutsi. We are going to talk more about those. Actually, they'll be our first two today. We'll talk more about those. I'm going to try to give you what's called a mnemonic device to try to remember which is which. I mean, it's how I remember it. So hopefully it'll work for you. So let's get into it. We are going to talk about the Hutus. Now, just in case you don't remember, when you get to that link, I mean, this is about the 10th, 12th time we've done this. So I imagine you know this already, but just in case, when you get to that link, all this stuff up here really doesn't help you. You can go right down to this. Now, for those of you who like the paper copies, they are going to be in the back. The words are back there. If you want one of those, you can grab it. But first word I would like to talk about is Hutu. Now, that is the majority ethnic group in Rwanda. We talked a little bit about where Rwanda is located. You can see it right there. It is in the circle. So that's the Congo. That's Somalia, if that rings a bell for anybody. You got Tanzania, you got Kenya right over there. So kind of like middle of Africa, maybe towards the east, but that's where it is. Talked about it yesterday. So the Hutus are the ethnic majority. Now, this is how I remember who killed whom in Rwanda. The Hutus. Again, they're the majority. Hutu starts with H. You see it right down there. And it's whole starts with H. But then you have the other whole. This is how I remember it. Hopefully it helps you. And it's just so weird that it might. So like the Hutus, they were like almost the whole population of Rwanda. They're the ones who are going to do the killing. Now we'll get to the Tutsis. Unfortunately, they are the ones that do actually get the brunt of the genocide. And they are the ethnic minority of Rwanda. Tutsis. But as we learned yesterday, this is not on the paper anywhere. For a long time, the Tutsis were in power. And maybe I should stop right now. Stop right here, because we're going to get into colonialism again for like the 100th time. I'm going to pause here. Can anybody briefly describe what colonialism is? Hopefully, somebody said it's basically when a European power goes to a different part of the world and basically takes over. Mostly bad comes out of that, right? While we learned about that with Cambodia, the French come in. When they leave, there's a vacuum. Somebody's looking for power. Civil war ensues. Same thing we'll find out happens in Rwanda, only it's the Belgians that take over. And they kind of start this thing, if you remember from yesterday, identification cards. And on that identification card, you had to put which tribe you belong to. And the Belgians favored the Tutsis. So when it came to picking government positions of power, it was mostly the Tutsis that were selected by the Belgians. And when the Belgians leave in the 1950s, that power vacuum is there, and the Tutsis don't have enough numbers to combat the Hutus. And then we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, but if you remember from the video yesterday, there was one, we'll learn on Monday, but there's one event that triggers it in the 90s, but it had been brewing for about 40 years. All right, back to the words, trying to keep this as short as possible. The next one is overwhelming. Overwhelming. And I do have a sentence here for you, but let's read the definition first. Very great amount. Very great amount. We had last week, we had vast. Vast. It's like almost the same. There are so many words in English that mean almost the same thing. It can be very frustrating, but overwhelming. Man, I hope high school, when you get there, is not overwhelming to you. But I do think it is going to be a big change. Middle school, everybody's bodies are changing and stuff. You get the hormones going on. So, the workload isn't as great. But by the time you get to high school, and a lot of people, about a quarter of you, will be in honors classes. And I hope it's not overwhelming for you, but I do think there is going to be a period of time where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not in middle school anymore. So I hope you're not overwhelmed by that. But you could have, there's a sentence right down there, you could have an overwhelming amount of work to do. So don't get stressed out. That'll pass, but it's going to be probably an adjustment. All right, the next two I want to talk about together, because when we talk about some of these Hutus, we can talk about moderate Hutus and we can talk about extremists. So if you look under moderate, you can see that scale. It's kind of in the middle, moderate. And the definition is a person whose views are between conservative and liberal, in the middle. And if you've ever watched the news or whatever, you might hear of moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats. They're not too crazy. They kind of right down the middle of their party's philosophy. Okay. But when we get to Rwanda, Hutus, remember, they're the ones that do the killing. But there are some moderate Hutus, and they might have the opinion of no, we don't need to kill anybody. And it was one of those things we talked about. I don't remember who said it. Oh, I think I do. I think it was Isaac Schultz said there's this whole idea of kill or be killed in some situations. And it kind of led to that, where these moderate Hutus were like, no, we shouldn't be killed. They were also victims at some point. The next one is extremist. So that's not in the middle anymore. That's on one side or the other. But I think in most cases, you need to be scared. You need to be worried of extremists. This is a person whose views go beyond what is usual. It's the opposite of a moderate, an extremist. All right. Of course, if you have any questions about any of these words, shoot a hand up. We'll stop. We'll pause. Moving right along. I think these next two, let's talk about these next two together. You will not see either of these on the vocabulary quiz. I think they're just too specific for what we are talking about, but I wanted them to be on the word wall. I wanted us to have a discussion about them because it will help. They're going to be mentioned in the article. and it will help for us to discuss it beforehand. So make myself small, make these bigger right here. So you got something really long, and there's an acronym right here to help us out. National Revolutionary Movement for Development. I mean, come on. Who can say that, right? But it's the NRMD. Again, don't get too caught up on that, but if you ever see NRMD, know that was the party that the Hutus belong to. A lot of extremists in that party, and they are going to be the only party in Rwanda at the time. And they are going to have government-sponsored radio, which we will get to. There's a radio station put out by the government. Last week, we talked about propaganda. Maybe now is a good time to pause here. Does anybody remember from last week? What the heck is propaganda? So hopefully somebody said propaganda is kind of like fake news put out by the government. It's definitely meant to get its citizens going in a certain way for a certain cause. That certain cause might be nefarious. It might be not a good thing. And that's what's happening here. We'll get to it, but this political party had a radio station, and they would have some kind of moderate views, but mixed in some extremist views. And they would say, I think in the article, it says, Tutsi, the radio would say, Tutsis are cockroaches. They need to be exterminated. So if you only have a couple radio stations to choose from, maybe only one in Rwanda at the time, and you hear this over and over, and you're a Hutu, that's definitely propaganda. And they are going to be spewing some hate. Now, the next one, I'll make it a little bigger. Again, the acronym is RPF. There's another acronym. I don't remember what it is, but because so much French was spoken at the time, you might see those letters reversed. But in our article, it says RPF. And this is going to be the army that comes in and stops the genocide. Again, very much like Cambodia last week. I'll pause here again. Does anybody remember which army came in and stopped the Cambodian genocide? Hopefully somebody said the Vietnamese army, right? So that's how the genocide ends. All right, moving on. What are we at? We're at 13 minutes already. All right, oh my gosh, we got quite a few more. Okay, these will not be as these will not take as long. Hutu, Tutsi, I thought it took a little while. All right, soul, one and only, single, soul. So oftentimes you might hear like a soul survivor, the only one, but be careful. There is a different spelling, and you can see it right down there. Soul, it's like a person's feelings, like, you know, their soul leaves their body or something. So there's a different spelling there, but soul could be like person's heart, maybe. Or we have like soul as in only, right there, only. That is going to be mentioned in the article. I just wanted to review homophones for a second. All right, moving on. Ceasefire. So when you hear cease, it's a very like fancy formal way to say stop. And a ceasefire, you can see that there, is when both sides of a war agree to stop firing their weapons for a period of time. Ceasefire. All right. That shouldn't be too bad. We've kind of already talked about this one too. This will not be on the quiz at all, but I wanted, and there's an ad there, government-sponsored radio. Kind of already talked about that, right? So the government had a radio station, and they could put whatever they wanted out on that radio station, and oftentimes it was propaganda. Next one, coalition. I do think I have a, maybe I don't. I thought I had a, yeah, I do. I thought I had a sentence for you here, but a coalition, if you look, the definition is a group of individuals, I'll make it bigger so we can see, with a common interest on which every political party depends. a coalition. So it's like a group is being formed to fight against something. And the group that forms this coalition, they might not have been together before, but out of a need, they do it. And basically in Rwanda, there are going to be a couple countries like France, the UN, they are going to form a coalition to try to stop the killings. All right, how about this sentence here? The good guys formed a coalition to fight back against Putin. So the good guys, it's very political, who knows, right? But maybe the US, England, France, Poland, they're all going in to try to help Germany. They're all going in to try to help Ukraine out, okay? So they form this kind of good guy network. Sometimes coalition can be bad, but that's an example of a coalition. Moving on. Excuse me. Plotters. All right, this can be a little bit difficult. You could read that sentence down there while I take a sip of water. 16 minutes. All right, let's go. We talk about plot when it comes to storytelling. That was one of the first units we did. We talk about movies, we talk about plot. This is a little bit different. Plot, it means to form a plan. We've talked about connotation. It usually has a bad connotation if somebody is a plotter. But a plotter, as you can see right there, is someone who plots to do something. They try to form a plan. You're never supposed to use part of the word in the definition there, which is why I have that down there. But it means to form a plan. A plotter is usually like a mutiny. We've talked about mutiny before. Usually a mutiny is about to happen if somebody is plotting against you. Mutiny. Does anybody remember? Pause here. Mutiny. The heck is that? Yeah. It's when a whole bunch of people, I think we talked about it when we talked about Harriet Tubman, but whole bunch of people, they don't really have the power, but there's a couple that have the power, and it's when those people decide to overthrow the government. I suppose in this classroom, there's only one of me. There's a lot of you. You could probably plot against me, form a mutiny. Please don't. Please don't. All right. We already did this one. Soul, right? I think the next one here is oblivious. Oblivious. Take a look at the picture. This person on a cell phone. Can you see it? I can make it bigger. This person is on a cell phone, and they are about to fall into a hole. They are oblivious. That means to be unaware, unconscious of something. Oblivious. All right. Just because this has been going on for a little while, I'm going to make it a little uncomfortable here, okay? But some of you know this story. Apparently there's a new guy around, kind of on the team, but kind of not. And apparently some people think he's cute and they were trying to get his number. And they're, hey. But he doesn't speak English very well. And I almost think he was oblivious to all the attention. He was definitely overwhelmed. Like, whoa, what's going on here? But I don't think he quite understood that somebody wanted to get his number. He was oblivious. And I hope there are some people that are blushing right now. Because there's a couple different classes that were involved. Yeah. All right, but oblivious. You don't really realize it's happening. I think this is our longest lesson it's going to be almost 20 minutes. Sorry about that. Hopefully, as I'm talking, you are writing down and almost maybe completed. You've almost completed your study guide. I was oblivious to the stairs when I walked into the room. My face was buried in my phone. So you just don't realize what's going on around you. Oblivious. I think we have one more, right? Is it tribunal? Yep. Tribunal. Let me make that a little bit smaller. I'm not sharing. Tribunal, a seat or court of justice, often to judge people for genocide or war crimes. And one thing about a tribunal, it's usually temporary. So it is a court set up, usually like if the genocide happened in Rwanda, they would make sure the tribunal was not set up in Rwanda. It would be in a different place. I almost think it was set up in Tanzania, the tribunal that we'll read about. But it's definitely not in Rwanda. And it's when a group of judges come together, lawyers, and they try people for war crimes. And remember with Cambodia, there was a tribunal, but only a few people were ever tried for that war crime, which often happens. It's very difficult. Like Putin has been accused of war crimes. Unlikely a tribunal will ever be set up to try him. All right, that is it. That's a long one, 20 minutes. My bad. Hopefully you get a lot out of it. If you have any questions, I'm going to come around, as I always do, see if I can help in any way, and then we'll finish up with Little Frank and Beans.